So, good morning. As Ali said, I'm Dara Howley and I am from the RAF Museum where I'm the volunteering manager. And what we're going to be looking at this morning is community. Ali, can you just let me know that everyone can see the presentation
Yeah,
okay?
all good from my end.
Fantastic. So, in that case, I shall shoot ahead and get going. So, to cover what we're going to look at today, we're going to look at fostering an RAF Museum volunteer community and identity across all the sites and departments that we have. So, we're going to look at communication and engagement, we're going to look at stakeholder buy in, and we're going to look at assessing the impact. And what I'm hoping is that you're going to get some inspiration and we can brainstorm some ideas together and solutions that you can carry forward into your own practice. So, the reason we decided to put some work into volunteer community and identity is that we feel a thriving internal community is beneficial to our current volunteers and to our activities and plans that look outwards for community and connection. And we're trying to bring in some more volunteers, so that's just as important as looking after who we already have. So, to set the scene, I started working at RAF Museum in June of 2023. Volunteering was already pretty well embedded into most departments in the museum, but there was the sense of overall community or identity differed depending on kind of which location physically you were at or which team maybe that you were in. We've got 435 plus volunteers across two public sites, one storage site. We've got some remote volunteers and we've got volunteers across 10 departments. And within some of those departments, we'll have like different teams of volunteers. So it can be broken down even further. So there's different levels of awareness we found across all of these different groups of kind of the museum's mission, strategy, projects, other volunteers' engagements, what they were doing, and the achievements they had. And we wanted to build a bit more of an overall community identity so that we could achieve, all volunteers we felt should be connected to a core volunteering program and to each other. We felt that everybody should obviously feel appreciated. Volunteers should also feel informed and feel like they have a voice, which is something that they said to us they didn't really feel that they had. And we also felt that obviously best practice for managing volunteers should be embedded with all line managers across the museum, and we wanted to support staff to do that as well. There were some great things already in place. For example, there is an annual reciprocal visit where the volunteers from each site go back and forth to visit each other. We have a thank you event at the end of each year as well. There's milestone badges that are pretty well received by volunteers for the number of years they've been with us. And there was already a newsletter in existence. The events in particular were pretty fantastic. I wish we had some money for more better events, but with events, there's only a small group of people that can attend them, and there tends to be actually the same group of people comes over and over again. And I don't really know if we were just not reaching everybody about coming to them, or they weren't sure that it was for them, or if it was, well, we can only hold them at certain times, so not everyone's going to be able to turn up during those times. Our goal to foster community and identity align and intertwine with others that we have and are working on at the same time. So, for example, building a diverse and inclusive volunteer population, being more connected to our local communities, for line managers to feel confident and proactive in their role, and for there to be a strong foundation there then for future plans. So, what I'm going to talk about today is 4 actions that we did. Part of the plan tied to our communication strategy as well, which I'm not going to go through in full here. But what I will say is we'll talk about the newsletter and the chat. I'm also going to talk about stakeholder buy in with a specific focus on one very simple action. And I'll finish up by discussing assessing impact. The goals we have for this are ongoing. I'm not going to say that we fully achieved our ideal volunteer community and identity yet, but we've taken some strides, and I'm hoping that you can find something useful in all of this. Just to go over some of the challenges a little bit, introducing change is obviously always going to be a little bit difficult. In particular, we're mindful that you have to ensure the messaging is clear so everybody understands like why you're doing this, that you're not just doing it for the sake of doing it, or that I'm coming along obviously as the new staff member and want to just put my stamp on things. Um, Volunteers weren't necessarily accustomed to there being like a central authority is a bad word, but that's how some of them would kind of view it. I think that they've been within their own little tight groups for maybe a long time, and it if we don't approach it properly or carefully, that it could come across as though we're sort of forcing some sort of change on them for reasons they didn't understand. So communication was the key to that, we felt. Um, we have volunteers, obviously, across sites and departments, like I mentioned, so that's obviously a challenge. Getting buy-in from all your stakeholders, it's essential, but it's also a challenge as well. Um, the we need to think about the fact that not all volunteers are going to have equal access to technology or the confidence with technology as well. So that needs to be kept in mind. And one thing to think about is you should always think about different levels of engagement. So you can have volunteers who are very light touch. They want to just come in maybe once a week or every 2 weeks or something and do their thing, and they want to feel involved and part of the community, but they don't want to have like their voice everywhere and need to know everything. Whereas on the other end of the scale, you can have volunteers who are like with you very frequently. They donate a lot of time. They want to know what's going on. They want to have a voice in what's going on. They have ideas. They want to implement those ideas. So you need to be careful, obviously, not to listen to the loudest voices. You do want to do your best to look after those volunteers, but not at their expense of forgetting that there's other people that don't actually want to be that sort of hard involved, and making sure that they feel part of the community too, and they don't feel like they have to be getting involved in more things, that they can still continue their kind of light touch volunteering, and still feel part of the community. So, in terms of our communication strategy, just to go over this quickly, it was based on volunteer feedback and brainstorming amongst our team. And we put it in place pretty quickly after I got there in 2023, reviewed it a year later, and found that we're happy with how it's going and have kept it the way it is. Um, with communication, we feel that clarity, consistency, clear intention, inclusivity, and an awareness that even though you've sent out the message, not everyone is going to see the message or take the message in, are key to keep in mind when you're thinking about communication with volunteers. Um, the sort of number one change I think we've made is the weekly email from the volunteering team. So there wasn't that kind of regular communication from the volunteering team out to all volunteers previously. It's quite operationally focused, so to be like closures of a hangar or events that are coming up, exhibition updates, reminders about they have to do safeguarding training, where to find further information about things if they want to. And we send this to both volunteers and line managing staff so that everyone's kind of getting the same messaging. So this has been the most successful thing I think we've done so far. This being we got a response that 67% of our volunteers always read it and 32% usually, 92% finding it useful, 94% finding it informative. So that's been definitely our most, I think it's probably been the most effective change. Um, I'm going to talk through now the bi-monthly volunteer newsletter change we made and also the introduction of a chat. Um, the mediums of communication we use, our main one is email, but we also have to keep in mind, obviously, equal access to technology doesn't exist, and also confidence. So we also use notice boards. We have the chat, obviously, as well, which is a new thing. And we also obviously just communicate through, down through line managers and team leaders. So the newsletter, we did two things here. We did a refresh of two things. It's an important vehicle for the community and identity of the volunteers. It is a volunteer newsletter, not a museum newsletter. So we refreshed it by changing it visually and also by changing some of the content. In terms of submissions, we're more actively encouraging submissions than I think was done before. It's still a struggle, but we've changed it. Just simple things like saying you don't have to submit a whole article. Just submit, if you've taken a really cool photograph, just submit that. We're happy. Just put that in the corner with a little caption. Great, job done. Um, in comparing 2023 to 2025, we've seen some increase in readership and an increase in positive responses when asked if it's enjoyable, useful, and ideal in length. What we've definitely noticed, though, is we hear more of, I'm going to write about this for the newsletter more regularly from volunteers when they do something really cool. So I think that's our greatest sign, I think, so far that it's been successful. So the visual refresh, what did we do? So on the left, you'll see what it looked like before. And then on the right, you can see what it looks like now. It was pretty simple. We went from a Word template that kind of was dry and drab, and we just found another program to use. In this case, we went with Canva, but there are other options that you can go to. And we just set up a style template and we stick to it. We're using the branding colors from the museum. I've put together a style guide, what font size to use. It just simple stuff like that, just to make it look a bit more professional. And then also we've put in alt text for all the pictures that are in there, which is a very important thing to do as well. So it's a simple thing, but consistency in the kind of visuals of how things look and sort of professionally putting it, I think makes a big difference. If you notice a difference in coloring between the two pages that I put there, it's because the museum changed their branding colors during the summer, so we had to update that. In terms of content for the newsletter, we asked the volunteers what they wanted. In 2023 and in 2025, we asked the same questions. The graph that you can see on the slide there is what we got in 2025, and the answers were pretty similar. So they mostly want to be kept informed about what the museum's doing, and they want to see positive feedback and news about volunteer awards. If you had asked me at the start, I thought we were going to get more of wanting to see historical articles written by staff and volunteers with lots of knowledge. So it just goes to show it's important to ask. In our annual survey this year, we have an 11% increase in volunteers saying they felt informed of the museum's plans and strategy, and a 10% increase in the number of volunteers who say they know who the senior leadership team are. So that's showing that the information's getting across. People are learning about what they want to learn about. So one of the biggest changes I think we've made is the introduction of a chat. I'm sure a lot of you probably have volunteers who get together and do WhatsApp chats and stuff, but they're not always secure, and it also means people have to share their personal information with each other, which is not ideal. So we switched to a new management system in 2023, and within it, it has a embedded chat. We decided to use this internal messaging platform for volunteers. We've set up kind of operational chats and we've set up social chats, and these are grouped into, each team has a different groups of chats, but we also have overall like location wide chats, and that's good for like, oh, the heating's broken in hangar 3 today. And we also have one big giant social chat, and volunteers do have the power to decide whether or not they get the messages or not. They can hide the chats altogether and just ignore them, or they can turn off the notifications. Whatever way, they have control about how much they are actually involved in them. Our main mode of information, operational information, is still email, so they're not missing out on messages. We also lobbied the management system company to set up an alert for if someone gets new chats, that it sends a notification once a day to their email. So rather than getting pings on their phone all the time, they can opt to just sort of get an email recap of everything. So in the process of reviewing this system, we're looking at the whole system at the moment, but what we do know so far from surveys is that half of our volunteers use the chat, 16% frequently and 34% occasionally. 45% prefer not to, but only, happily very small percentages of them are saying that they don't want to at all, or that they didn't know what it was. So I count this as a win, because we can see lovely social conversations taking place in the social chats, which is great. And this is like across groups, across locations, across different teams. And response from volunteers, we've got 18% saying that of that 50% say they use it for social chatting. So it is more being used for operational reasons, but the socials are still there. And I think that's a really great way of getting connections across. So I want to break into some breakout rooms now. I've gone through some of the stuff we've done, which hopefully you found informative and useful. But we're going to break out and do 8 minutes of chatting amongst yourselves, and then come back and discuss for about 10 minutes afterwards. And so what we want to talk about is communication. One size does not fit all. And I've got 5 different prompts, which Ali is going to help me assign to each room. So you can all talk about slightly different things. And then, as we usually do with these things, when we all come back, if maybe one person from each group can just give us like a quick 30-second recap of what it is you discussed in your breakout groups. So if we're all back, then I think what we'll do is just go through every group. So group 1, could you have your nominated person speak up and just let us know in about 30 seconds or so what it was you were discussing and what you kind of came up with?
We were discussing ways that we could change the way people work. So if we want to develop get people to look at communication, we would maybe get a peer mentor. But actually, some of those people don't want to do that. So we were just looking at what innovative wording could we use to get people to come on the journey with us to share um, how we want to communicate. And was that we got people something new in? Was it that we didn't use shadowing and mentoring? And did we get staff members maybe to invest a little bit of time in them? So it was just looking at what the barriers really to why communication isn't going the way we want. And did sometimes people don't want newsletters, they don't want the emails. We can't please everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you can't. I guess it depends. The other thing to be thinking of too is when you are asking for people's opinions, if you are sending out a message saying, please fill in the survey or come along to this sort of consultation event, that message might not get to everybody. So they might not learn that that event is on. So you kind of end up with, there's this perpetual fear I have that there's people out there that just are doing their own thing and I'm never going to reach them. So yeah, that's why I think it's better to, at least in the start, rely on as many different communication systems as possible. So like they're obviously going to check in with the line manager. So you kind of make sure everybody's been told that they should expect this or they can be consulted about that. Um so if that does anyone have any questions or queries they want to make on that point? No? Okay, great. Thank you, Andrea. Can somebody from another group pipe up, please, and let us know what you discussed? Thank you,
We
Catherine.
we were in group six, so I've jumped the queue a little bit. But we were talking. We were all really small organisations, which was really nice. And we were sort of talking about how we have some of the bigger organisations come to this conference and say, "Oh, we have to make sure that we're really personal," and we're like, "We are really personal. Like we're
Yeah.
tiny. Like we're already giving people a cup of tea and like having that chat." So we were just kind of talking about transitioning like horses for courses, as you were sort of saying, one size doesn't fit all. So for some of us, actually, a fortnightly email and a spreadsheet works brilliantly. And then, sometimes when you're kind of expanding, it is time to think about technology, but how do you kind of communicate that to your kind of to a group of volunteers. None of us like change, but sometimes that can be even more difficult when people are sort of basically not being paid to put up with change.
I actually went through this exact thing 2 years ago, where we had to switch from one sort of, well, we already had a type of technology, but not everybody was using it, to another one. So if anyone wants notes on that, I can help you with that one. Um, yep. Does anyone else want to come in on that and add anything to it? Nice to see you, Catherine, by the way. Shall we move on to group two? If you can remember which group two, Ali's warning me that people may not know what group number they were. So I'm saying next group, please, rather than group two, group three.
I'm not sure if I feel like we might have been group two, but I'm not sure. Um, but yeah, our group, we were just talking about sort of volunteers and how, for example, with me, I work quite closely with people, so it's that personal touch, kind of knowing that some people maybe don't have email, so it's better to, talk face to face or over the phone. So just to make sure that everyone's involved and they know everything they can, and then Sarah was on the call as well, and she was talking about, she has so many volunteers that it's obviously harder to know that, but because they work with, lots of quite closely with other people, obviously they're able to get that communication and newsletters and all sorts of things. Um, so yeah, it were just different ways of making sure everyone knows about all the opportunities that are available, really.
Yeah, and I find sometimes there's a fine balance between giving like options and reaching out by multiple routes of communication and oversaturating people with communication. So I'm going to talk a bit about surveys at the end of this session, and I think that's where that kind of comes in to play because you want to see, do people feel like they're getting like it's too much, or are you doing what you want to do, which is giving everybody options so that you can reach everyone? And even though we're quite a big organization in terms of like the number of volunteers we have, the number of sites, the number of departments, we do still have that knowledge of which volunteers struggle with technology or which volunteers it's easier to get a message across to them if you talk to this person who, is their team leader every time they come in. So that we do have some creatures of habit and we know who they are, especially because a lot of our line managers and some staff on my volunteering team as well, we have been there for quite a long time, so you get to kind of know these things. So even though you have a big organization, you can still learn stuff like that. And then record keeping is your friend as well, where it comes to like trying to keep in mind, oh, this person, we need to make sure if you need to get a message to them, it has to be through this route, etc. Andrea has a question.
Yeah, I think because we're quite a big organisation, we've got 20 venues, and I think the local teams do a really good job of working with their volunteers. They chat to them, they see them, they send out their own messages. I think the problem as an organisation we have is the whole picture. If you've got some people that want to know the wider trust and what's going on, and other people are not interested. And
Yeah.
that's the bit of what do you share with them? How far do you go? How once you start something, you've got to continue it or adapt it. You can't just go, oh, I haven't got time this month, I won't bother, because then your feedback isn't great.
Yeah.
And it's raising the
Yeah.
profile, I think, of the overall trust in a way that the volunteers want, because some come because they love that venue. That's all they want to know.
Yeah.
They don't want to know what's going on anywhere
No
else.
interest. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a bit of a balancing act, isn't it?
We definitely get those messages too, where people say to us, like, I don't want to be receiving this weekly email. There's nothing in it that's of, I don't find it informative. There's nothing to do with me. And again, these can be the louder voices, and you find that they're actually, it's coming at you a lot. You're getting that feedback a lot, but actually, it's not that many people that are feeling that way when you get down to it. However, you still don't want anyone to be like suffering under way too much information, especially when we have the operational weekly email and we rely on it to get certain very key messages out, that are kind of like I said, operation strategy kind of stuff that needs to get across to people. So we did a really simple thing with that one, which is at the start of each email we basically bullet point it, and we break the email also down into sites so that we're asking people just to open it up. If you don't want to be getting the email all the time, you check your bullet points and just sort of say, okay, that relates to me, and read that bit, and the rest of it you can ignore. Whereas there's other people that want to be really involved, like you say, they want to know more about the trust than they want to, they're not just thinking about their venue. Then those people can read the whole thing from start to finish, and stay as informed as they would like. So there is a way to hopefully meet everybody's needs, but then on top of that you have to be looking at like how many knots are you tying yourself in to do that. So other things we've been doing are looking at, like, we find something that works, how do we keep the cogs rolling on that without it having to be too much work? So constant back and forth. Group 3, would you like to tell us what you were discussing? By the way, I'm sorry if I look shiny and strange. I got a flat tire on the way to my location this morning, so I'm delivering this workshop from the back of a rental car.
I was part of group 4. None of us requested to be the head of
That's
it.
the thing with groups, isn't there?
But I'll quit unless any of the others want to jump on. We talked a lot about the kind of the resources that we have to be able to do this. I'm, for example, volunteering manager is in addition to other parts of my job. I'm part-time, other members of the group are part-time. So it's kind of like having the most efficient method of communication. Some of the others talked about the fact that they do newsletters. I don't do a newsletter. We just do a weekly kind of update, but it is something that we are looking to do in the future. And I think the method of communication, that kind of casual communication, like the group chats and stuff like that. I know some of our volunteers do have their own little WhatsApp groups, and pockets of volunteers that I manage, I have WhatsApp groups with them, just chat, sorry, but haven't actually gone fully into the is it the WhatsApp groups tool that you
Oh, you
can
can do
use?
communities now.
Communities, that's
WhatsApp,
right.
yeah.
Because it's, well, I don't quite understand how it works, and it seems too complicated for me to work out now, even though I'm partly in groups, communities outside of work. So yeah, understanding what best method for communication is tricky, I think, sometimes, and knowing when they're going to read it. I often write emails and I get to the end of it and have to apologize for such a great big long email, but I do the method that you're talking about by bulleting it at the front so that people can get it. That is really useful. And then the 8 minutes went. So that was as far
Yes,
as we got.
they do fly. Thank you for that. It's this is where networking with each other can be really great because we can learn from each other's institutions. So if you like find someone in the chat that looks like they're doing something that will help you, then poke them and ask them if you can have their email address and go to a meeting. And you can also, my email's at the end of this if you want to talk about it, because I do have a lot of not only do I have plans and strategies, but I also have, I'll talk to you about how I'm a data fiend and I have all the results of everything. So if your organization is anything like mine, I've got you. But I've worked in smaller organizations too. Consistency, I think, is key. Definitely, like decide on one thing and be consistent about it. Great. Is there our other group there? Would you like to speak up, or if you would rather not speak up, do you want to just a couple of you put something in the chat and then I'll continue if we prefer? I can't see any nods, so if you would prefer that, please send me a little reaction thumb up. I have, okay, we've got a reaction thumb up. Thanks for that. Great, thank you. Brilliant. Okay, so let's move on a little bit. I'm going to talk about stakeholder buy-in, and then I'm going to talk about assessing impact, which is a another way of me saying here's how to do surveys. Oop. All right, let's go on to stakeholder buy-in. So I think everybody's probably aware getting people on board is difficult. So the stakeholders that we needed to get on board with this were our line managers. They have the day-to-day contact with all of the volunteers. And it's essential to have best practice outlined for all of your line managers to ensure that the responsibilities are clear and the standard that's expected is understood, and also that they have a way to reach out and ask you questions if they aren't sure about something. To be straight with you, the majority of our line managers, when I came on board, needed a figurative kick in the behind. In fairness, they've been somewhat adrift, obviously, because there hadn't been a volunteering manager for about a year before I joined. So things were kind of drifting apart, and new managers would have come in that time and not received any training and things like that. So, I mean, and it's the same thing if you're just line managing staff. You can find that your middle management can be terrible at actually managing a lot of the time because they're too busy. Everyone's too busy these days. I feel it's a little bit more so with the volunteers though, because this volunteers are free and kind of feeling that that most of the responsibility for volunteering lies with the volunteering manager or the volunteering team, and just doing anything more than the kind of day to day is not their responsibility. So getting that message across was key. So clarity about responsibilities, and delivering line management training to everybody, having a line manager's sort of handbook, and encouraging staff who have been there for a while anyway to do some refresher training as well. And that's contributing then to our goal of best practice for volunteering being embedded across the organization, gives every volunteer the same or similar experience. And there you've got your community and your identity. Senior management usually don't directly line manage volunteers. So I'm talking about like heads of departments here. So they don't usually have volunteers that they line manage directly. It's usually their managers line manage volunteers, but they're still a key component because volunteering is embedded in museum strategy. They have responsibility for implementing strategy for their particular teams. So they attend line manager training. They're looped into all the comms. So those weekly emails that go out are sent to all volunteering line managers as well. And they're invited to, we've got quarterly line manager meetings, which I'll talk about in a moment. Anything that you can do to keep it in mind that, volunteering, you should be thinking of this strategically is key. Buy-in from senior leadership and board of trustees. I think people have varied experiences with this. One obvious reason they control the money, but also our senior leadership and trustees have been very supportive of volunteering. They recognize the value of volunteering. They truly show their appreciation for contributions, very much on board for being present at events, for signing retirement cards, all that kind of stuff. The support there, even if the money is not there, I suppose, or even not the buy-in, I guess, strategically isn't really there, which is rare. Having that top-down commitment, and messaging from senior leadership about the importance of volunteering strategically and supporting volunteers and appreciating volunteers is brilliant. And then obviously volunteers need to be bought into the changes. And our challenge was not to take over those pockets of community that already existed, but to add to them, to embellish them. And within that, though, you've got some insular volunteers and reaching those ears are quite difficult. We've talked about that a little bit. So trying to be as strategic as possible about that and sort of how can we get to these people and go through that route and then make it clear here's the standard communications we're going to be sending out, and here's how to see them, and they're important, and you should see them or read them. So, how have we approached stakeholder buy-in? Tip is clear, consistent, easily accessible communication for everybody. That's the number one thing in my book, anyway, that you need to be doing in order to keep everybody bought in and on board. So I'm just going to talk about one simple thing that we did with our line managers, which is we started our quarterly meetings about a year ago. We started doing this with sharing positives. So these can be volunteer achievements, so individual or team achievements, or anything that has a positive effect on volunteers, or how line managers or volunteers have had a positive effect on staff, line managers, or a team. So, for example, here's some examples that came up in a recent meeting. So, one person updated the group that 27,148 objects have been condition checked by volunteers to date. So that's just a really positive achievement that volunteers have done. Another one was someone shared that a volunteer from our volunteer access panel came to one of our volunteering reciprocal visits during the summer. And then this person is autistic, and they would find that the bus trip, being at a different site and being shown around, the lunch gathering, were all big personal challenges for them. And this is something that they are proud to have achieved, and the staff are really proud of them for being able to go on this trip and enjoying it. And so it's a really positive update in a way that it's positive. Volunteering has positively affected somebody's life. Also, I think showing that the community we've created is considered supportive by that person, that they felt they could do it. And also, it made all the staff smile as well. So this engages our staff at the start of the meeting, very much so, but also in terms of the overall volunteering program, and also gives them a sense of the other activities that other teams are up to and what other volunteers outside of theirs are doing. Um, they share kind of micro things and also bigger things as well. They might be about a contribution to a large project that staff would hear about by internal comms anyway, but they could also be about something smaller that staff maybe wouldn't have heard about except that they were at this meeting. So these are all being worthy of being shared, and they all just lend a positive to the meeting at the start, and then also people's buy-in to the overall volunteering program. And it's also then an opportunity for me to say, oh my gosh, that's really great, could you write something for the volunteering newsletter about that? Or, oh, did you get a picture of that, could you send that to me for the volunteering newsletter? And that's more engagement, more involvement from the staff. So I've shared some of the feedback we gathered from surveys and reports, and outlined the feelings of some volunteers to our line managers that certain groups were being showcased more than others in the newsletter and for achievements. My team can only add to the newsletter what we've been sent to add to the newsletter. And so simply just communicating this, letting people know that we were getting this feedback, that some people felt that they weren't being recognized or no one knew what they were doing, did whip some people into shape a little bit more, because, we want to be able to show what everyone's doing, but we can't know everything that's going on. We can't go looking for all the photographs. It's too much for one person to do, or one group to do. So this was actually just really effective, just to tell people that, so that they got a sense of what was going on and that they were able to address it. So I'm asking Ali now to put up a whiteboard, and I thought, just for 5 minutes, how can you overcome difficulties with staff or organizational buy-in resulting in active and contributing stakeholders? So any ideas that everybody has on that, would you like to share with everyone?
Right, everybody, I hope you can see that. If you can't, please just feel free to post into the chat. I've also put the question there if you can't see the whiteboard.
Take every opportunity you get. Not always invited to the room, so make the most of it when you are. That's good. Demystifying. Oh no, it moved. Demystifying top tips document. That's, yeah, good. Zooming out in the screen share, there should be a zoom in, zoom out button. Share volunteer newsletter with staff too. Yes, really important, really key thing. It goes out to every single member of staff. And then we also print a copy and put them into shared break spaces too. Consistent internal culture of showcasing volunteer impact. Brilliant. Wait till I tell you about my data collection. Stories and staff newsletter as well. It's a good one. Volunteering team try to work physically in as many venues as possible. Yeah, that visual presence can be really powerful. Oh, a stall at a staff conference twice a year about volunteering. Really good. It can depend a lot on about the culture of volunteering that your organization already has and whether or not like you're having to do the work to push it forward or whether or not it's there's to an extent at least it's already in place. I'm lucky that it was sort of already in place to an extent so that I just had something to build on. Whereas in other places you can find that you feel like you're starting from scratch really. Um, Hiring volunteers helped to change perceptions. Inviting volunteers to speak at team meetings. These are already good. Brilliant. Ali, shall we move on? I don't know if it's exactly been 5 minutes, but I'm conscious of time.
Yep, that's absolutely fine. I'll close the whiteboard, everybody. If you've got anything, last things and final throws, please add.
You can always add stuff to the chat as well. That will get shared too. Thank you, everyone. Those are all really great. So I'm going to move on and do my last little bit. So assessing impact. I am a data fiend. We gather data quite regularly, and this informs our decision making and then backs up what we ask line managers and senior staff and senior leadership to do. So we get our data from regular volunteer reports. So after they've done their shift, they fill in a report to sort of say how many hours they've done, etc. So we can put little questions there. Ideally not put too much because it's annoying for them if they have to fill in like 10 questions every single time. And you can just leave some optional ones, but have a couple of core questions that are always essential. We do surveys. We have consultation sessions with volunteers in person and online, and then we record the online ones to share. And also communication. So just talking to volunteers or having them send you an email about something, you can pick up stuff from there as well. I also use industry best practice and research to refer to when we're looking for ideas and backing up how why we should put our ideas in place. I'm going to just talk a little bit about yes. So key to gathering data. Make sure that you're doing this with purpose. So what do I need to know is a really important question and not what do I want to know. So this is a trap I can often fall into. We need to know certain information for reporting or for proving that what we have works. We gather other information to inform our decisions and strategy, but we have a lot of information as well that will have to go directly to certain stakeholders. So we've got national lottery funding for something, for example. There's certain things we have to inform them of to prove KPIs are being hit, etc. So it's really a case of what do I need to know, and I often go through like a survey maybe that I've created and just kind of go, okay, what can I remove from this? Then I got volunteers to test it and tell me if it's too long or too annoying. Set the question and answer to be as quantifiable as possible. So open text boxes, you'll need to go through them to pick out what you need. But if you just have choices and ratings, these are quantifiable data points that you can quickly transfer to mean something to you. That being said, always leave a text box because people do want to put stuff down in words. So either at the very end of your kind of survey or questionnaire, or I would usually do it if it's a longer one at the end of each section, leave a text box because people do want to write those things down. And it's frustrating for them if they go through a whole survey and all they have to do is press buttons and they don't really feel like they've got their point across. Explain why you're conducting the survey or holding the consultation session. You want that buy-in. Volunteers can decide then if they want to contribute or not. Then always follow up. So for our annual or biannual surveys, I introduce an action plan. I produce an action plan at the end. And then we always follow up with a you asked, we did regularly about 6 months later. For the more regular reports that come in from volunteers, our management system allows us to actually flag stuff. So if the volunteers flagged that they want an action to be taken, that sends out a notification to us and then that could be managed in the background. So very lucky that we have that. You might need to come up with your own situation with spreadsheets and things like that. But if anyone needs any tech advice on doing things like that, I've become quite the pro at automating stuff. And beware of survey fatigue. Too many will mean less engagement over time, especially if it's perceived that there's no change happening. So that's why that kind of "you asked and here's what we did" is so important, because they need to see that something's actually happened. So, last thing here, answers in the chat. What low cost or free resources can help? Is there a resource that you already have that you can use in a new way? And while you guys are answering that in the chat, those obviously be shared with everybody afterwards. I will also include mine. And while you're doing that, I'm open for questions if anyone has any. So, answers in the chat, everyone. What low cost or free resources can help? And can you use a resource you already have in a new way? And while that's happening, if anyone has any questions, or Ali, has anyone put anything in the chat that I've missed? Oh, goodness, there's a lot.
There's lots of really good chat going on. But yeah, I would suggest that if anyone's got a burning question, then after this discussion, you draw that out, please.
Anyone who has a question he wants to ask, just feel free to unmute yourself. Okay, so
Alex has got a question for you, Dara. Alex, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah. What I wanted to ask is there other ways of actually doing recording except for like a spreadsheet or volunteer management systems? And is there any sort of other more cost-friendly ways of actually doing volunteer management without actually going through the full a program which has more costs with it?
As far as I know, and someone can correct me on this if they want to, I don't think there is a free volunteer management system that you can use. There is, so if your organization has already put funds into, say, a customer relationship management system, you can use that to manage your volunteers. So you can kind of just like tag onto that, and it won't be too much of an extra cost to your organization. But you need to be careful, obviously, that volunteers are kept separate from, customers or whatever it is. So communications are going out only to customers and not to volunteers, and only to volunteers and not to customers. And so there's a bit of kind of tech and thinking about it that you can do, but you can do it. Ideally, it's obviously better if you have a particularly volunteer management system. But if you're moving from spreadsheets to needing more, that's maybe a slightly more cost effective way of doing it. The only thing about that is there's no volunteer platform for them to interact with. The great thing about a volunteer management system like Better Impact, or what we use is Volunteero, is that there is a volunteer interface. So they do things on their side as well as you doing things on your side. So for us, it's scheduling, it's communications, it's seeing what training they've done. Volunteers get little reward badges when they've hit a certain number of hours, that kind of thing. Annette has said in the chat that her brokerage platform offers free digital volunteer management, and that they use Team Kinetic over there. I'm not aware of how expensive Team Kinetic is, actually. I know about the program, but I haven't looked into the cost of it.
Dara, Nick's got a question for you from Imperial War
Hi,
Museum.
Nick.
Me again. It was really just something on the back of something somebody said. I think the other thing not to overlook is the power of doing it face to face. So we hold monthly coffee and cake sessions, but also just sometimes going for a wander around. We had a lot of trouble getting into sort of back of house and with the sort of curatorial staff, and I just found going and being a general pest, building a relationship, getting to know them, and it's worked wonders. It took a while, but they're now on our north side in with preservation, curatorial, sort of conservation, and once they start to see that, the curators have got a volunteer. So I think we're all really busy, and sometimes it's just taking that time to get out and actually go and speak to people, and also talk to the volunteers, because quite often they'll tell you stuff that's really helpful or informative, or could be a problem brewing that they won't come and tell you in the office space. So get out and about. That would be my other tip.
Yeah, showing your face is really powerful. Ruth, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, no, I was just going to echo what Nicola said. I think it's really easy to undervalue how important it is when you just pop by during someone's session and just say, "Oh, how are you?" Because that's when they tell you the stuff that they were gonna hold on to until they were really cross about it. The fact that the person that comes after them has been turning up, half an hour early, and they're being expected to finish, or some such something that for them is huge and for you can take a 2-minute thing to sort out. And it feels almost like it's a bonus or a luxury to have time to do that because everyone's so busy. But it's actually And it looks as if you're just having a chat with people. I think even other staff perceive that as like, oh wow, she's got plenty of time. Look, she's gone off to chat to volunteers. But in fact, it's like a really key part of the job, and it's easy to overlook it.
Yeah, the value of those relationships where you can have them is, yeah, unbelievable. And I think if you've got within a large organization like I'm in, I will see certain volunteers a lot because they'll come and have their break near me, or we just happen to be around on the same days or what have you. And then there's others that I will not see at all. And I'm kind of reliant on the volunteer line managers then to do their part in terms of that face to face and that personal contact. So yeah, that definitely goes into the training, that kind of, making sure you take a moment to have a cup of tea and a chat, and listen to each other and talk to each other, because it is a really important thing to do. So yeah, having that and having volunteer team leaders where you've got bigger groups of volunteers that maybe one line manager can't spend all their time with, is also a really key thing to do as well. If put that in place if you find that that's going to be useful for you. These things also take a bit of time at first when you're kind of putting them in place. So, like Nick was just saying, taking the time to go out there and show up in those areas, and talk to people and build those relationships. And even where you're introducing volunteers, you convince people, oh, we could do with some volunteers in this department or within my team. Then, you got to be straight with them that it'll take a little extra time to get that set up in the first place. But once you do, you get sort of pick up some momentum, and then that carries forward hopefully, and everything should be in place to make it as sort of straightforward and easy as possible. But it just takes that little bit of time at the start. I'm looking to see now, has anyone mentioned anything else in the track chat? Airtable is free and a bit more sophisticated than Excel, but not as good as a VMS. Okay, that's good. Thank you, Laura. Program of lectures,
Dara,
social sessions.
there was a lovely comment from someone, sorry, I'm going to misquote here, about how volunteering is embedded into somebody's mission. That's very exciting and obviously a bit of a rarity.
Ooh.
Does anybody want to talk a little bit more about that? And have you got any wisdom to share back to the group here about how to potentially advocate for that kind of positioning of volunteering in an organizational mission?
That was me. That was my organisation. So I work for Northeast Museums, and I did share a link in the chat to the page where the mission statement is on, and we've got 5 challenges in our mission statement that we all work towards, and one of them is social mobility, and under the paragraph, volunteering is mentioned in there. In regards to advocating, I can't take all the credit for the mission statement. And I will say that my manager, who is on our senior team, is very pro volunteers as well. So having someone in that position that is not only very vocal herself, but also passes on anything I say to her too, is really useful. And I know in regards to like volunteering and things like that, I've always been, if I've seen a need for like more resources, I've always shouted about it, even if I know it's not likely that we'll get it or we need to search for funding. I'm just not shy in asking for it. Is my big advice. But I do recognize I'm in a privileged position to have an understanding and pro-volunteering manager as well. And as a general organization, our director is very pro-volunteering too. So just really lucky to be in that position.
That's great. I do find though, sometimes you can have volunteering in a mission or in a strategy, and then it doesn't actually translate, or a lot of the people just assume the responsibility is on the volunteering manager to to put that into action, when actually you need buy-in from everybody. So it sounds amazing that you have not only it's in the mission, but also you've got sort of senior staff above you for who are totally invested and advocating for it as well. So that's amazing. Everyone go and work at Helen's organization. It sounds like it's great there. um uh yeah, no, it's translating that and making sure that it's not just very it's not too transactional, that it gets a bit personal as well. So volunteers really do get quite a lot out of it. We're quite lucky at the moment, I think, having national lottery funding, especially because a lot of the lottery's focus is on like how we can contribute to the local community. So a lot of the strategy and what we're trying to sort of go for with our action plan in terms of that project have volunteering embedded, and also they wanted to prove that we've been reaching out to the community. They wanted to prove that our volunteers have you know, are having health and well-being benefits from it. So we have the money, and it's in writing that that's something that we have to do, and show the lottery that we're doing it. And it's having really positive results. So hopefully then that can carry forward in just like core museum strategy as well. So yeah, and then like you said, ask for it, even if you're not sure you're going to get it, or even pretty sure you're definitely not going to get it. For the lottery bid, there's a first bid and that happened, and then there's a second bid. I just like put in a load of stuff that I thought we wanted, and we didn't get everything, but I actually did get more than I thought I would get. So it's worth asking, and look around for kind of research and talk to others in the industry to see if they've got any, a quote from someone about how beneficial something was. It can go quite a long way. Ooh, chat, more on the chat.
I think we're running out of time, Dara. So what I would say is a very final question from anybody. Absolutely welcome. Otherwise, I think it's a chance to say thank you very much and wrap up, and we'll send you back to the main conference room to the Volunteer Leader of the Year. Dara.
Okay, great. Yep, that's everything from me. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope it's been useful, and everything's going to be sent to you afterwards. And my email, Ali, I guess we'll share it to you. If you do want to get in touch, just let me know.